Why do you guys think we feel anxious or a little trepidatious, or why?
Fear of man's faces, like just this necessity to perform.
Oh yeah, necessity to perform. Sure, yeah, absolutely. What if you fail? Yeah.
I was going to say scared of like blowback.
Pushback from the people you're talking to, like what are they going to say to me? How am I going to look? Yeah, that absolutely. Can I answer their objections? Right? Yeah. If you say the wrong thing, what if you look like an idiot? Or worse, what if you make Jesus look like an idiot? Oh no. Yeah.
The fear of rejection.
Fear of rejection. Yeah, absolutely. I think all these are true and good responses, and that they're preventative in us doing what we're called to go make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded, right? That's the Great Commission. But because of the way that we feel inside, sometimes that keeps us from it. Not even just going out and evangelize, but I mean, it can be more intimidating. I'll tell you what, this is true of me. The Thanksgiving table at my family is more intimidating than me going out to a Planned Parenthood. It is. Because I'm talking to people I like really care about. And the people outside on the street, I honestly don't really care what they think of me. But I certainly care what my brother, my sister, or my mom thinks of me, right? So what I want to do this morning is I want to present us with a plan. I think one of the reasons why we feel this way, there's two reasons actually I think that we feel this way, these types of feelings, is one, I don't think we have a plan. We don't train ahead of time, prepare ourselves before we go, we just go. It's like if we sent soldiers out in the battle without sending them to boot camp first and just said, hey, go figure it out. How do you think that's going to go? Horribly. It's not going to go well. So I want to offer you guys a tactic and a plan, a game plan to go out and be able to share your Christian convictions, or really anything, in a way that kind of dulls these nerves because you know how it's going to go, because you know how to control the conversation. The second reason is that oftentimes we put too much pressure on ourselves. And this is something I've said in passing in I think almost every talk, certainly during the Q&A, that we feel like every time that we have a conversation with somebody, we have to save them. Or we have to get to the gospel. And I'm going to say something really, really controversial, guys, and I'm willing to get the kickback here. I don't even think necessarily you have to get to the gospel in every conversation with somebody. The way I look at it is we're part of a master plan. Right? God has a master plan of evangelism, and we're to play a role in it. So we're to be in tune with the Spirit and share just as much as He wants us to share. Maybe that's just to break the ice a little bit and answer some objections, to get that one step closer, that door open just a little bit more, so that maybe the next person that this person interacts with will share the gospel. And so there's something that kind of hit me actually through my boss. Yeah.
Where would you say God's sovereignty plays a role in evangelism?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Where's God's sovereignty play? It's total.
Yeah.
So and this is what I mean, guys, is you and I, we don't resurrect anything. God does. We don't save people. God does. We're instruments, we're tools. God uses us as His instrument and His tool to evangelize people. That's what He calls us to do. So we got to trust God in His sovereignty, that He's going to guide that person to the Lord or not. And we just got to be faithful. The way I like to say it is God, I don't know if I've said this before, but God is 100% responsible for His duties, and we're 100% responsible for ours. And ours is not to save the person. Ours is just, and I'm going to get to this, is just to offer something for them to think about, I think. This changed me actually through my boss and my mentor, Greg Kokel, right? He's like one of my favorite people on the planet. I go to a lot of conferences. I speak at a lot of conferences. And what I've noticed is there's a disconnect between the content and the conversation, the scholarship and the relationship. Like, you guys are learning a lot of great stuff here at Joshua. A lot of great stuff. But if it doesn't trickle its way down into your soul and then out your mouth, really, what good is it? If it just rests as mental assent, just up here. I mean, it benefits you. It might benefit your family as you guys grow up and have a family, maybe. But we need to create a bridge between the content, the scholarship, the stuff that you're learning, and then the conversation and the relationship so that we can share what it is that we're learning. Well, how do we do that, right? How do we do that without looking weird? How do we do that without getting ourselves trapped maybe in a situation that we feel really uncomfortable in and we don't want to be there anymore? And that's what I want to give you guys now. I want to give you guys a game plan. And here's that insight that Greg taught me years ago through his book, Tactics, actually. Tactics is a book that my boss wrote that all of this information comes from. If you want to learn more, you can buy Tactics. It's a phenomenal book. So how do we do that? Well, first there's an insight, and this is what I was getting at before. And I realized that not all of us are going to lead a ton of people to the Lord. Guys, I have friends. Okay, so I'm really good friends, and I serve on his board with this guy. His name's Nick Vujicic, right? Nick has no arms and legs, so he's an evangelist, right? And he's a really good evangelist. God uses him in incredible ways all over the world. And I have been with Nick where he has a 35-second conversation with somebody and leads them just to the Lord. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, how does that happen? How come I'm not like that? I can't even evangelize my parents. Like, what is going on, you know? Because, and then I put this perspective on that Greg taught me here, that there's two different groups of people, right? There's those who garden and then those who harvest. Nick is a harvester. He picks the fruit. But I have a feeling that's a whole lot of gardeners out there. There's a whole lot of gardening going on. You know, before any harvest, we need a good season of gardening, nurturing, soil tending. Whoa. That's so cool. That's the downside to having a 7-foot fireplace. So, like if we think about it, I think that oftentimes we put this too much pressure on ourselves, and all of us feel like we have to be harvesters. When in fact, I think that there's probably a lot more there's a lot more gardeners in the room than there are harvesters. This is actually a biblical principle, guys. Jesus, I think, taught this. Here in John, he's looking up to the hills, and he's seeing people come down the hills. And this is like, right? There are 4 months, and then comes the harvest. Behold, I say to you, this is Jesus, right? Lift up your eyes and look to the fields, that they're white for the harvest. Already he who reaps is receiving wages and is gathering fruit for life eternal, right? People are getting saved. So that he who sows and he who reaps can rejoice together. For in this case, listen, this is really interesting. In this case, the saying is true. One sows and the other reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you've not labored. Others have labored, and you've entered into their labor. Now, notice what's going on here. It's exactly what I'm talking about here. Notice there's two groups of people, right? There's those who sow and then those who reap. There's harvesters and gardeners. And not everyone is a harvester. There are a lot of people who are gardeners. So what I want to be focusing on is I just want to focus on gardening a little bit. I just want to be a good gardener and not wear the responsibility of harvesting everybody that I have a conversation with. And then notice what happens here. There's the two groups, but they all rejoice together. Because it's one team. It's like this, guys. Okay, I have been trying to talk to my mom especially about Jesus, praying intently, almost without ceasing, that she would come to know Jesus. Now, if I'm driving over, I get over the hill here, and I'm going down, and finally I get back to civilization where I have cell phone reception, and my mom calls me on the phone, and she goes, hey, John, you know what? I met this really nice lady, and we started hanging out last week, and it turns out that she was a Christian, and she led me to the Lord. Do you think my response is going to be like, what? How dare she? I've been gardening you all this time, and now somebody else is going to pluck you out of my basket? No, of course not. I'm going to be like, praise God. Praise God. Somebody has now come along and joined the team with me and plucked the fruit because it was ripe. Praise God. I'm going to rejoice with them is what Jesus is saying. You know, we're all on the same team. There's two groups, and I have a feeling that there are a lot more gardeners than there are harvesters here. And that's okay. It's okay if you don't lead people to the Lord. You talk to Greg Kokel, who's one of the best speakers, presenters I've ever heard. He'll tell you he hasn't led somebody to the Lord in 30 years. The way he says it is like, oh, what a loser I am, right? Well, not necessarily, because then you trace the chain of relationships back and see where he's been used in somebody's life, like my life. I used to listen to Greg before I was a Christian on the radio as an atheist. I would call his radio program to yell at him to tell him how stupid I thought he was. And now I work for him. But he didn't lead me to the Lord. Do you think he's upset about that? No, of course not. Well, he might be upset he hired me, but that's up to him. But yeah, so how do we make the most of all the brief opportunities that maybe we have? When you guys are on the streets of LA, you're not going to be able to form a major relationship with these people, I don't think. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll form lifelong relationships with some of the people. But how do we make the most of every opportunity? You know, well, we need that game plan that I was talking about, which is the second reason I think a lot of us, well, it's the first reason I mentioned that a lot of us don't engage. The first is that we put too much pressure on ourselves. We feel like we all have to lead somebody to the Lord. It's just not the case. The second is we don't have a game plan. So let's look at this game plan. Our plan here is super simple, guys. My goal is just to do a little gardening. It's just to put a stone in somebody's shoe. The stone in the shoe tactic is like, or technique, and think about it. Have you guys ever had a stone in your shoe? Yeah. Do you feel it? Does it kill you? No. But it annoys you to no end until you get it out. So what I'm asking you guys to do is just be annoying for Jesus. A little bit. Not really, but like I want you guys, like when you're talking to people, think about this. All you're trying to do is put a stone in somebody's shoe. You're trying to put something into their mind in a way that perhaps they haven't ever thought about it. So when they leave the conversation, they're thinking about something in a new way. Maybe it annoys them. Maybe you're putting a stone in somebody's shoe. That's what we want to do. Well, how do we do that? How do we initiate conversations in a way that doesn't seem weird or make us seem weird? Some of the concerns that you guys mentioned before. How do we stay in kind of the shallow end so we don't get in over our head? Has anybody ever gotten in a conversation with somebody and fairly quickly gotten in over your head? I mean, I have. I still do all the time, guys. It's amazing. When you start throwing yourself out there, it's incredible what you're going to start learning from other people. You know, there are a lot of smart people out there. Well, we need this game plan. That's what I want to offer you guys over the next, I don't know, I got 20, 25 minutes. And it's going to help you guys, if you practice it and do it, I promise you, as we're going through this, you're going to think it sounds so simple, it can't possibly work. You know, it's not going to work. And I'm telling you, it works. I'm telling you, it works. And it keeps you in the driver's seat of the conversation. It takes pressure off of you. No matter how much you know or how little you know, it's going to allow you to converse in a way that's non-confrontational and productive. And ends hopefully putting a stone in somebody's shoe. Paul, he said this, right? Conduct yourself with wisdom towards outside. Notice he's saying to you with wisdom, be smart, right? Making the most of every opportunity. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned, as it were, with salt. He's saying not only be smart, but be nice, right? So that you will know how to respond to each person. Not only be smart, not only be nice, but he's saying be tactical, so that you will know how, that you can respond. And so, because I'm not trying to get into a fight either. Like if you're getting into a heated argument with somebody and you're fighting with them, who wins? Do they win? Do you win? Does Jesus win? No. So you want to be able to stay level-headed in conversations. And keep in mind, guys, the tactics that you learn, this one in particular that we're going to talk about, it's powerful. But it's not like a slick ruse, or we're not interested in contorting and twisting people into like logical pretzels or anything like this. Keep in mind that the basis of all of this that leads us in our evangelism, it leads us in our conversations with people, is the understanding that the people we're talking to are infinitely valuable. Why? Because they're made in the image of God. So as you go into conversations with people, let me tell you a few things, guys. I want you to be, as you go out into LA or you go home or wherever you're going, you're going to bring this stuff. If you're going to have a conversation with somebody, one, view them as God views them. 2, be genuinely interested in them. If you're not interested in having a conversation, that's okay. Don't have a conversation. You can control that. You can say something like, you know what? I'm just kind of in my own headspace right now. I'm not really interested in a conversation right now. You don't have to engage the person. But when you do, be genuinely interested in them. Talk to them and ask them about their story and hear where they're from and what they're up to. Be genuinely interested. View them as image bearers. And then this tactic here, we're going to talk about the Columbo tactic. But not all tactics are the same. Not all tactics are the same. There's a great movie. I hope the sound's going to work. But there's a great movie. Have you guys ever seen Nacho Libre?
I'm a little concerned right now about your salvation and stuff. How come you have not been baptized? Because I never got around to it, okay? I don't know why you always have to be judging me. Because I only believe in science. But tonight, we are going up against Satan's caveman. And I just thought it would be a good idea if you...
Not all tactics are the same, guys, right? You don't want to walk around downtown LA with a bowl of water. Hi-ya! You have been baptized, right? Tactics, we got to put on the right tactic for the right situation. And today I want to just talk about, just briefly, what we call as the Columbo tactic. Now, most of you in this room have absolutely no idea who Columbo is. Do you know Columbo? Oh my gosh. Yeah, Columbo was an old, like 80s show that this guy was a detective on the police force, but he looked like an idiot. Like he wore this trench coat always. It was wrinkled like he slept in it. And he was always scratching his head like, I don't know, like, oh, none of this makes sense, you know. But he wasn't an idiot. But what he did and the way that he solved crimes is, does anybody remember, what did he do all the time? He asked a ton of questions. He asked questions. And that's what we want to do. That's the key to this tactic I'm going to teach you guys. It's an opportunity for us as Christians to go on the offensive in an inoffensive way. To ask questions that are carefully selected to productively advance pretty much any conversation. It doesn't have to be about the Christian worldview, but it's really powerful if it is. So this is our game plan. It's called Columbo. And we ask questions. Why? Well, first, questions are super polite. I mean, who doesn't like being asked about themselves? It's the way that you get to know people. How you doing? What are you up to? Where are you from? What do you like? What don't you? You see, these are all questions that we ask in order to be polite and get to know somebody. They get you information, you know, about what the person believes and why they believe it. Questions take the focus off of us. If you're asking questions, notice what you're not doing. You're not really saying anything. You're making no claims. You're just asking questions. And they also keep you in the driver's seat because if you're asking, the person who asks the question steers the conversation. If you want to switch to a different topic, you just ask a different question. That's why this is super powerful. It keeps you in the driver's seat. This is the most important one, the last one, and we're going to see why. I quoted Schaefer the other night, and this is his quote, and I love it, right? If I have only an hour with somebody, I'll spend the first 55 minutes asking questions and finding out what's troubling their hearts and mind. Then the last 5 minutes, I'll share something of the truth. I love his hat there. Right? I love the idea that we just ask questions to get to know who people are, to get to understand what's troubling them. Because oftentimes, guys, what they first say is troubling them isn't really the issue. I see this all the time, especially when somebody brings up stuff like problem of evil. Like somebody's got to bring up like, oh, well, God can't exist because of all of this evil in the world. Well, they're not actually struggling with the intellectual problem of evil, right? The intellectual problem of evil is the idea that there's an internal contradiction in God's nature and character. God's all loving, God's all powerful, so he should want to stop evil. He should be able to stop evil, but he hasn't. Therefore, he's either bad or he doesn't exist. No, they're not wrestling with that. They're wrestling with actually something that's happening in their life. So if somebody brings up the problem of evil, well, I'm going to ask them a question. I'm going to be like, well, what exactly do you mean by the problem of evil? I'll say, what's going on in your life right now? Instead of going on the offensive with a Christian apologetic, like, well, actually, there's not an internal contradiction because I can give you 6 reasons why God should allow evil, and it actually grows us, and it shows that he loves us. And I think actually the problem of evil is a proof. I don't offer any of that. I just ask some questions about it because I want to find out what's trouble in their hats because they're people made in the image of God. Jesus asked questions, a lot of them. Have you ever noticed that? In the gospel, he asked a ton of questions. Why do you think he asked questions? Do you think Jesus asked so many questions because he didn't know stuff? No. Jesus was the smartest person who ever walked the earth. It's not because he didn't know anything. Jesus asked questions because he understood the rhetorical force behind the technique, the tactic of asking questions. So there's 3 uses for the Columbo tactic, and I only have time to give you the first 2. And again, you can buy the book or whatever, and I wouldn't be surprised if the book is floating around somewhere. And to get the entire game plan. So let's dive in here. Okay, the first application of Columbo. You gather questions. And this is the first question. So the first step is to gather information, to understand what it exactly is somebody believes. And this is the first question. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that is the first question. What's the first question? That's like really, really poor. What's the first question? What do you mean by that? You didn't say it. What's the first question? What do you mean by yes. What do you mean by that? Do you guys think you could remember that? Okay, so what's the first question? What do you mean by that? That's right. What do you mean by that? This is the key question. What do you mean by that? It's a clarification question, right? It's delivered in a simple and mild manner. You're just like, hey, what do you mean by that? When somebody offers a claim, they make a claim, you just say, what do you mean by that? It's a question that tells you what a person thinks. And we ask that so we don't misunderstand the person. Or maybe even worse, you don't misrepresent the person. I mean, we've all been in conversations where somebody's misunderstood us or misrepresented us, right? What do you mean by that? It can look differently too. I mean, you could ask questions like I'd like to know more about your thoughts on X, Y, or Z, or explain what you mean by what you just said, or what does that mean for you, or could you define that for me? You know, it's super easy, guys, and let's just practice. Okay, somebody says this: there is no God. What's a question you could ask? What do you mean by that? Or you could say, what do you mean by God? Because, and this is something I mentioned before, if somebody says, what do you mean by God? My first question is going to be, what do you mean by God? Because they might not believe in or be objecting to the same God that I believe in. Oh, I can't believe in that angry sky daddy. Oh, okay, great. I don't believe in him too. Do you think it would be important to know what the person thinks about who God is before we start talking to him about God? Absolutely. Or how about this? I'm an atheist. What's a question you could ask? I mean, you guys are so good at this. It's unbelievable, right? Like, what do you mean by, how about you ask, what do you mean by atheist? Because there's different types of atheists. There's a lot of people who claim to be atheists that aren't really atheists. They just say they are. But I don't want to put that label on them. They're putting a label on themselves. I'm going to let them explain to me what they mean by atheist. There's some atheists that believe in the soul, for example. They believe there's a metaphysical reality on some atheists. They believe atheism is merely a claim about God, and that's it. Well, that would be important to know. So we want to ask them that. Everything's relative. What's the question? What do you mean by relative? What do you mean by everything? Is that statement relative? That everything is relative? You see what I'm doing here, guys? I'm just asking a simple question. It really is this easy. It really is this easy. You just ask the question, what do you mean by that? And let them explain it to you. Another good one. You're intolerant. What do you mean by intolerant? And I'll give you a clue into why this is important to ask this question. What do you mean by intolerant? Because what it means to be intolerant has shifted and changed in recent times. right? When we tolerate something, what they mean now, what the word means now is total acceptance, affirmation, encouragement into it. Well, that's not what it means to tolerate something. The very definition of tolerance means you're putting up with something you disagree with. In order to tolerate something, you have to disagree with it at some level. You don't tolerate things you agree with. You agree with them. So it'd be important to understand, what are you talking about? Or if somebody calls you, why are you forcing your a bigot? Did you say bigot? Well, bigot. What do you mean by bigot? Dude, this is a perfect example. I was just at a birthday party. My sister-in-law had triplets, and they turned 1. And I was sitting at this birthday party, right? And I'm sitting there with my sister-in-law's ex-husband. Totally awkward. And he is like so liberal in every stretch of the imagination. Atheist, liberal. And he's like, the second I see him, he says Donald Trump is a fascist. And I'm like, I don't even care. Like, I'm not even politically motivated. Okay, I literally said to him, well, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know if he's a fascist. And I just kind of like walked away. Well, he kept hounding me. So I asked him, what's the question you think I asked him? This is last weekend. What do you mean by fascist? And what do you think his response was? Crickets. He couldn't define what a fascist was. And this is a response that you guys should expect when you're asking this question. This is one of the powerful parts of it. He wanted to take out his phone and Google it. And I was like, no. You're using a term. If you're using a term, you should know what it means, because it's a serious term. You're making an accusation about a person. Don't you think it'd be good to know what it is you mean when you use these words? So oftentimes when we ask this question, guys, do not be surprised if you get complete silence. Because most people haven't thought about what they mean by the words they use, especially today where we live in a hashtag society. They regurgitate things. Christians do it too, by the way. So that means it's important for us to know what it is we mean when we say certain things, because you don't want to get caught off guard. So it's important to ask this question. What's the first question? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Ask it all day long until the cows come home, guys. Now, there's limits. There's definitely limits. If I get home and my wife calls me an idiot, I'm not going to ask her what she means by that, because she might just tell me exactly what she means by that, because I do stupid stuff, So there's limits. Like if you're at home and your parents say something, you might not want to just keep asking questions, or there's certain instances if your boss is saying something, you might not want to lead with, oh, what do you mean by that, But you could ask it in a college setting. Think about the rhetorical power. So there was a girl that I met at Sprach camp. I point to Jen because Jen taught at this same camp in Germany. And I met her. She was a counselor, an English counselor there, and she came home and she was about to start her second year at Cal Poly Pomona. She was a philosophy major there, and she was taking her second year philosophy class, a big lecture hall, 300 students, and the professor was your typical professor that like you see in God's Not Dead. Very angry against God. He literally said on her first day in class, he said, would every Christian in the room raise your hand? So she was loud and proud, Gina, raised her hand, along with maybe a dozen or so other people in the classroom. And he said, it's my goal of this class by the end of this semester, when I ask that question, nobody raises their hand. Wow. And she called me all types of, I don't know what to do. What do I do? And then I taught her just this simple tactic. What do you mean by that? I told her, just ask some questions in class. So the next class, he made a statement about God and the reliability of the Bible. You can't trust the Bible. And she asked the first question.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what do you mean by Bible? When you talk about the Bible, what are you talking about? You talk about the 66 books? Are you talking about just the New Testament, the Old Testament? Are you talking about the Apocrypha? Are you talking about the extra biblical books? Like, these things are important things to know. So what exactly are you talking about the Bible? And then she led the conversation with the next question that we're going to go over, which we're going to have to wait for a minute. But notice, this first question, it engages the person. It shows you that you're actually interested in the person, that you want to know what it is that they believe. And notice that it also causes the person to think. Many times when you ask this question, it did with John, my ex-brother-in-law. Ex-brother-in-law? It's so strange. Ex-brother-in-law. It paused the conversation, and you could tell by the look on his face, he knew that what he had done was completely dumb. He knew it. He knew he was cooked. He knew it. The conversation was it was a moot point. He looked like an idiot. He looked like an idiot. And it causes them to think, and sometimes it causes them to introspect and maybe realize that they aren't quite as clever as they think they are. And also notice what's happening, guys. There's no pressure on you. Have you made any claims? You're just asking a question. It's that simple. That's the first use, right? What's the first question? What do you mean by that? So here's the second app. That's the first application. The first application, what do you mean by that? You're gathering information. That's all you're doing. You're gathering information. And here's the second tactic, the second part of this tactic, right? And it has to do with something called the burden of proof. Do you guys know what burden of proof is? Yes. The person who makes the claim has to prove the claim. The number one mistake I see Christians make when we have conversations in evangelism and everywhere, not just evangelism, is we assume the burden of proof no matter who's making the claim. Like, somebody makes a claim about the nature of the Bible, and all of a sudden we take it upon ourselves to prove that claim wrong. But keep in mind, guys, who here is homeschooled? Have you guys taken logic at all? Yes. Do you guys know what an argument is? There's two parts to an argument. Do you guys know what it is? Two of them? Claim and evidence. You need the claim and the evidence, the second part of the argument. Anybody who just makes a claim, all they're doing is making a claim. They're telling you a story. Until they give you evidence, that's all it is a story. So if somebody wants to make any claim they want, before they offer you the evidence, they've really only told you their opinion. So if somebody's going to argue the nature of the Bible, saying, oh, well, the Bible is unreliable, they have to prove that. We don't have to prove them wrong in their claim. They have to offer us evidence as to why they think that. Don't assume the burden of proof. Do you guys get that? Yeah. Don't take on the burden of proof. It's the number one mistake I see Christians make. Place the burden of proof on the person making the claim. How do you do that? Well, you ask a question. How'd you come to that conclusion? How'd you come to that conclusion? That's the second question. What's the first question? What's the second question? How'd you come to that conclusion? Yeah, and that's the key question. There's alternative options too, like why'd you say that, or what are your reasons for holding that position, or why do you believe what you just said? So this is the follow-up question. Now what we're doing is we've gone from an information question, like saying what somebody believes. Now we're asking them why they believe it. Now we're saying, show me the evidence. Show me the evidence. And don't be surprised again, guys, when you get to this stage, you really hear sounds of silence. It's crickets. Because even if somebody knows even if John knew what fascist meant, I guarantee you, I know this because I took the conversation there later, I guarantee you he didn't know why he was calling Donald Trump a fascist, especially once we were operating according to the proper definition of fascism. You just get crickets the entire way. So what's the first question? What's the second question? You guys are unbelievable. Let's look at some examples here, guys. We live in a multiverse. God didn't create it. What's a question you could ask? That's the first application. Yeah, what do you mean by multiverse? Right? What's another question? We're taking it a step further. How'd you come to that conclusion? You could say something like, could you give me the evidence that's led you to believe that there's a multiverse? How much evidence do we have for a multiverse? 0. we have theories that stem from quantum systems and stuff like this, but I've heard it said from a quantum scientist. I've heard it said that I think it's actually Lawrence Krauss said that if you claim to understand quantum physics, you don't understand quantum physics. You know, you ask the question, like, can you show me the evidence for a multiverse? Like, we should be open to this, you know. Or this one here. This is my favorite one. The Bible's full of contradictions. What's the question? Yeah. I love it like this because I almost always have a Bible on me. So I do, I'll have my Bible on me. The Bible's full of contradictions. I'll go, oh, can you show me one? No, you don't have to. What do you think happens? What do you think happens? Because most of the time the people who say that, they've never even really looked in the Bible. All of a sudden, you're placing the burden of proof on them. You're making the claim. The Bible, I am open to the idea that the Bible is riddled with errors. Please show me one. Silence. You had a question? No? We could talk about that maybe later. Okay. Yeah. So the Bible's full of mistakes or contradictions. Yeah, well, show me one. Where? Show me the evidence. All religions are the same. Really? How so? Because in the background, we understand that they're not, right? Because they contradict each other. Right? They nowhere more than in the person of Jesus. Right? Islam, Judaism, and Christianity do not teach the same thing about Jesus. They contradict each other. Jesus can't be the Jesus of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity at the same time. So they don't teach all the same things. You know, ask the question, place the burden of proof. They have to prove the claim. Now, back to Gina. I think that this is an important thing, right? And there's, I want to reflect for a second just on the tone of our questions. What do you mean by that, and how'd you come to that conclusion? They're engaging, they're conversational. They probe a little bit, but they're friendly. So they're appropriate, I think, to ask a professor. But there's something to keep in mind. So Gina asks the question, well, what do you mean by Bible? And he describes it to her and defines, he clearly knows his stuff, and then she's going to ask her second question. This is what she did the whole semester, ask questions. How'd you come to that conclusion? Show me the evidence. And you want to know, this is really important. What we don't want to do at this point is allow anybody to reverse the burden of proof. Remember, they're making the claim. They have to prove it. So the professor, she said, okay, well, show me the evidence. And he says, oh, well, you're clearly a Christian and know all about it. Would you like to come up here and teach us about the historical reliability of the Bible? And at that point, what I told her to do was, this is where you back down. This is what you say. You say, well, I haven't made any claims. You don't know whether or not I believe the Bible is historically reliable. I haven't said that. You've made the claims. Do you think you could show me the evidence? You see how she didn't let the burden be reversed on her? Yeah. He's making the claim. He has to prove it. Now, in this instance, this is what we call the professor's ploy. In this instance, keep in mind, guys, the person with the mic always wins. Like with the atheist role play, you guys, it was unfair, right? Because anytime you guys brought something up, if you backed me into a corner, I'm going this way, I'm going to change the topic of conversation. It's not fair. Same thing with like in a classroom. If you're interacting with your professor, and I say push at your professor with questions, certainly. You know, but understand that that the person with the mic has the power in that instance. Gina, what she ended up doing is actually taking the conversation from the classroom into his office hours, which was really great. You know, he didn't change his opinion, but he softened towards her, where he was very, very hard for the first couple weeks on her because she was very vocal. But then he eventually softened towards her and they became like kind of friends, you know, because she had good conversations, because she asked questions. And she didn't lead with what she thought she knew. And the questions actually, I mean, professors love answering questions. They love it. The professors are experts, right? Sometimes they claim to be experts in things they're not experts in, and that's where the tactics can be powerful. But she became friends with the professor. And I mean, he didn't come to Christ or anything. I wish he did. But I actually emailed him and offered to come into, I don't do debates. I just don't do them. But for this instance, I was like, I would love to come in and offer a discussion between you and I in front of your class about some of the claims that you've made in your class. Would you be open to it? And he didn't ever respond. which would have been really fun. I thought it would be fun. Like, I'm not going in there to make the guy look like an idiot. He might have made me look like an idiot. I'm open to that too. But certainly I'd love to have that conversation. And you want to know what I would have done? I would have asked him questions the entire time. You know, because these claims that we make, it's questions. What's the first question? What's the second question? Yeah. As you guys ask these questions, it's super simple. And you're going to discover a few things. The first is that people aren't nearly as clever as they put on or they think. They're not nearly as smart. And you're going to also realize, and you're going to find out very quickly, that people of differing worldviews really don't know as much about their worldview as you know about yours. Do you guys understand when you leave here, you are going to know probably like your knowledge base is going to be like in the like the 90th percentile for Christians. You are going to go know more than almost anybody at every one of your churches. Some of you might know more than even your pastors by the time you leave here. I'm not banging on pastors. They have a hard job. I'm just saying I'm lifting this place, Joshua, up. So you guys can be confident to have conversations with people, especially when we're just asking questions. You know, people aren't that scary. Engage them. Now, I asked the question at the onset, like there are times when sometimes we get in the conversations that are over our head. And so I want to teach you guys, it's called getting out of the hot seat. So I was sitting in my sister's apartment in Boston years ago. My kids were so like, I think I only had 2. And I was talking to her and 2 of her friends, actually her future husband, Colin and Caitlin, her best friend. And we were in her apartment. I'm talking to them about the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God. Yeah, it's basically the bump of stuff. Where'd all the stuff come from? And guys, I was hammering my sister and her friends. I mean, I was crushing them. I was like on point. You know, have you ever had those conversations with people where like you're just having all the answers that just come into you? You're like in tune with the Holy Spirit. It's like boom, 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 and you're crushing them. And then my sister, I'm like waiting to just offer, hey, well, do you want to believe in God now? You know, because I'm like completely winning. And then she says this. She says, John, would you mind if I called a friend and invited him into the discussion? I said, sure, I'll beat that atheist up too, no problem. Bring him on. Well, Louis, her neighbor, came over. Louis, it turns out, is a PhD from MIT in molecular biology, and he's now a tenured professor at University of Tennessee. Uh-oh. Very, very, very quickly, I realized I was way out of my depth. Like, I read like 2 books by William Lane Craig, and this guy like is writing books on this stuff, you know? And he started spanking me. And I went from up here, king of the world, to, oh man, I suck, almost instantly. And this is how I handled it, and this is how you can handle it. And this is keep this in the back of your mind, guys. As you're asking questions, you might ask people who know what they believe. They can answer that first question. What do you mean by that? There are some people that you're going to talk to when you ask them to show you the evidence. How'd you come to that conclusion? They're going to be able to show you the evidence. But don't be scared of that. Because this is what I did with Louis, and you can do it with anybody. I literally said this. I said, Louis, it's clear that you know way more about this than I do. It's clear. I was wondering, can we pause the conversation? Can I get a pencil and piece of paper? Come back, and you can thoroughly beat me up again, as long as you do it slowly and methodically while I take notes. And then can I get back to you? And what do you think he said? Absolutely. He's like, I can't wait to crush this Christian. He was like me before Jesus, like a Christian crusher, you know? And notice what's happened. One, all I am is honest. I don't know. Like, why are we so scared of saying that? You know, if somebody brings something up that you don't know about, don't make it up. Be like, wow, I've never thought about that before. Do you think that I could just take a couple notes? In this instance, Louis is really, 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 really smart. So I'm going to talk to Louis about what he believes and why. I'm not going to go to a book because the book I read isn't going to be Louis' thoughts. I want to hear what Louis believes. So notice what's happened. I'm getting a free education, right? I'm forming a relationship. Do I have any pressure on me? I have no pressure on me. Make sure if you say, hey, can I get back to you, you do. This is like, I mean, now, we're talking more than a decade ago. I'm still friends with this guy. And where do you think I go? If anybody offers me a challenge having to do with like evolution or biology, do you think I go read 100 books? No. I email Louis and say, Louis, I heard this. It didn't make sense to me. Can you explain it to me? And in like 4 paragraphs, I'm getting a summary of 3 or 4 different books, so I don't have to dig in. I've formed a relationship, free education. And it all just comes from being honest. I don't know. Can I have some time to think about that? Of course they're going to say yes. Do you guys think you can do this? Yeah. What's the first question? What's the second? How'd you come to that conclusion? That's right. If you guys ask these questions when you're out on the street, you can't fail. If you get into a situation where you feel tight, you feel pressured, back up. Keep in mind, through the questions, you're in control of the conversation. You haven't made any claims. And you just say, you know what? That's a great point. I've never heard it put like that before. Do you think I can get back to you? Do you guys think you guys can do this, right? Yeah, this is easy. It's super simple. So who here is excited to go to LA and evangelize? Yeah. Who's nervous? Yeah, I'm nervous for you guys. It's really fun. But if you keep this stuff in mind, just try it out. What do you mean by that? How'd you come to that conclusion? But also keep in mind, guys, there's something that you guys are going to do that I think is really valuable. Have you told them what they're doing? Can I spoil it at all or no? Okay, never mind. Are you sure? So you're going to be asked to have a meal with somebody, right? I don't know if you guys know that. Now some of you are like, I'm suddenly dropping out of the program. It's not that scary. If you guys want to have fun, you want to live this exciting Christian life, this is what I used to do when I had more time. I'd sit in a coffee shop, I'd put a piece of paper on the end of the table that said, please join me. It's so cool. Try it out. If somebody comes up to me and say, what's this? I'd say, oh, I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee and just have a conversation. Wow. That's it. I know, mind-blowing, right? Holy smokes, there's all these cool people out there that have amazing stories. Well, when you're in LA, I think you're going to be asked to try to buy a meal for somebody. What a privilege. To not only fill somebody's stomach, but have the opportunity to fill their spirit. Right? To be able to just talk to them. No pressure. Why? Because all you need to do is ask them questions. Where are you from? What do you believe about God? Why do you believe that? What's led you into that understanding? Where'd you grow up? How's your relationship with your parents? How'd you end up here? What mistakes have you made? What things have you done well? Where do you wish you could be? All these questions, just getting to know people. Spend 55 minutes asking what's troubling their hearts, and then 5 minutes sharing something of the truth. Super easy, guys. Try it out. I promise it's going to work. Sound good? All right, can I pray for you guys? Holy Father in heaven, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to spend this time with these amazing students, Lord. I'm grateful for this place, the Wilderness Institute, Joshua Wilderness Institute. What a special place, Lord. I pray that you rain your grace and your protection around it. And for those of us in it, Lord, would you continue to grow us into your image, into the image of your Son? Would we be image bearers in that way too? As we go out into the world, would people look at us and would they see the hope that we have, and would they come to us and ask us to give them reasons as to why we believe what we believe? And then would we be wise in the way that we respond? Would we move towards people because they're valuable and lovely and beautiful and fearfully and wonderfully made? For these students, Lord, they've got 3 months left. For those of them who are struggling, Lord, I pray over them right now a spirit of comfort. Holy Spirit, would you be whispering your truths into their ears, reminding them of who they are? Your Bible, your word, Lord, says that they are more than conquerors. Right now, right here, they are more than conquerors because they stand in Jesus' conquering. They own that. He has overcome sin and death. And because of that, we can face trials. We can face trials with the hope, knowing full well that you'll never leave us, you'll never forsake us, you are always there. So would you push them, spur them on to new life here over the last third of this program, God, would you get them through? For those that are thriving and loving it here, Lord, I praise you for that. Would you take that energy and then focus it maybe into their class and their classmates here and then leadership here, and would they make the rest of this time an enjoyable experience, but more than just for their benefit, but ultimately for your glory, Lord. Would they become unified as they pursue you? They become unified as they move towards you, Lord. And as they leave here, send them out. Send them out into the world to be able to share the amazing things that they've experienced and learned here. Would it not be kept bottled up, but would they just live a life of self-sacrifice, daily taking up their cross and then pouring it all out for you, God? Change the world through them, God. We've got world changers and culture shifters right here. So would you hold them steadfast and strong, get them through this time. And as always, God, continue to move, continue to transform us, and continue to help us love you more and each other better. In Christ's name, amen.